Ayanda, a very good afternoon to you. It really has been so far 3 days of a buzz. Durban, especially in this COVID time, is finding itself as a hub of activity with visitors from all over the African continent.
Without a doubt, Tammy, good afternoon to you. A certain hive of activity since the official events, if you like, kicked off on Monday, and that's been going on full steam since then. An opportunity for a lot of countries across the African continent to collaborate, to rub shoulders with influential people across the various industries that are represented here. And the objective in some respects is for some kind of economic spillover insofar as the benefits are concerned, not only for South Africa, but specifically for Kwazulu-Natal as well. And so with that in mind, let's bring in our guest, get a sense of his thoughts. The MEC for Economic Development, Tourism and Environmental Affairs. There you go. Finally got it. Right. Thank you very much indeed for joining us, Ravi Pillay. Really do appreciate your time on Newzroom Afrika. Let's begin perhaps with the uncomfortable parts of our discussions, at least as of today. We're in a situation where we're dealing with load shedding once again in South Africa. That was announced by Eskom CEO Ayanda earlier today. That, coupled with, call it the hangover from the July riots that rocked part of this province, certainly doesn't make for the greatest of stories to tell from South Africa, at least on the face of it.
No, I disagree. Firstly, thank you for having me, and good afternoon to your listener, to your viewers. No, I think it's a great story because it demonstrates our ability to rise above adversity. And remember, this trade fair is a biennial event, which means every 2 years. We had bid for it for 2023 and won that bid.
Right.
2020 moved to 2021, supposed to have been in Rwanda. Rwanda had difficulties, which I don't want to go into details about, and we were approached in April, May. Can we save the 2021 trade fair? And so basically in 5 months, despite COVID, despite the unrest, we were able to achieve what you are seeing today. And I think it's been a little bit of a roller coaster ride for us, as you can imagine, but we are really over the moon that we've been able to pull it off. So the first thing is confidence.
Right.
That we will not be down. We're not down and beaten, firstly. You know, in fact, we have a program called #KZN Rising, and this is the practical manifestation of that. Of course, we've got over 10,000 delegates spread over the 6 to 7 days. We've got about 850 exhibitors, approximately 45 countries represented. On Monday, of course, we had 6 heads of state, including our own.
Right.
There's not much better we could do to build confidence of more direct benefit. I mean, you are here, your home is Johannesburg, you stay in a local hotel. So all our hotels are full for the next, for this duration of the conference, and that's the perfect warm-up for our December holiday season. Of course, it's also confidence building. We've got what is called an ICASA, which is a HIV, AIDS, and STI conference in December. I think it's the 7th to the 15th. That's another 2,000 delegates that are expected here in the ICC. That's almost back to normal. So let's not lament all the time. We have a challenge with electricity. We have a challenge with load shedding. Let's learn to adjust our lives and live with it, not pull ourselves down all the time about it.
Yeah. Well, I guess it's something to reflect upon in case it has a direct bearing on where we're at. I mean, to be fair, our lights haven't gone out yet, crossing fingers and everything else that stays that way.
Let me record that we've had good cooperation. In the same way the IEC had cooperation from Eskom, we had commitments. But we also got backup generators, and that's the kind of planning we must learn to engage in to make sure that things go forward.
Absolutely. Let me get your sense on how impactful this could be to ordinary businesses, some of which are operating around the precinct here at the Durban ICC. Part of the concern had been that this happens to be a very high-level, high-end discussion among senior government officials from across the African continent, and that doesn't translate into changing the material conditions on businesses who really need the kind of exposure that they would get by participating here. How have you factored that into your planning, considering how quickly you had to put this together?
Well, firstly, if you want to exhibit, then you have to pay a fee, whether virtual or physical. But if you wanted to just attend, there's no fee. All you have to do is comply with the registration process. which is important from a security and other logistics management based background. So anyone, still you've got 3-4 days to go. Today is Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday and Sunday morning, the closing ceremony. So those who are listening and want to go, just log on. You can register online, and there's no longer long queues at the registration, so you'll probably get your tag pretty quickly. And then you can, divide your time. You can spend 2 hours today, because it's big, it's massive. It's the entire ICC, plus Walnut Road, plus the exhibition center that's full of these, the exhibitions of various kinds. And it's opened my eyes. I really haven't had exposure to many of my African brothers and sisters, and just the leaders, the business leaders. We've got a big focus on young people.
Right.
There's about 300 young people, over 150 of them from other parts of Africa, and they've not just come, although they've been chosen as there to apply and be assessed, and it's fascinating engaging with those young people and to see how similar our issues are as well, but also what wonderful ideas they have. So here's a platform for our young people to engage with them. There's no point in talking about the theory of a African solidarity.
Right.
We've got to build the nuts and bolts of it, and this provides the perfect platform to do that.
Shall we speak about the strategic advantage that KZN in particular has? I mean, being able to host this, you've already outlined, has spillover benefits for things like hotels that are surrounding this area. I imagine the restaurants are smiling from ear to ear because, at least with me around, somebody's got to eat, and a lot. But speak to us about, just with trade in mind. I mean, there are 2 ports, for instance, in Kwazulu-Natal. That's certainly a big advantage for anybody who does business as a result of this fair, specifically in this province.
Jeff, those are 2 key strategic strengths, the 2 biggest ports, and people need to internalize that 60% of our imports and exports come through these harbors. Then it takes us through the N3 corridor and the logistical advantages of being located around the ports in the first case, and then the corridor in the second instance. And we're seeing those investments starting to take place. In the last 6 weeks, let's start, even post-unrest, there was an immediate rebound by our major corporates, which we found very inspiring. They immediately committed to rebuild. The only question was the time frame. Cipla, for example, a pharmaceutical company, reopened within 30 days and have now committed to doubling their capacity. Pharmaceuticals, by the way, is one of those sectors that has shown tremendous growth in the COVID period. Understandably, COVID is a pandemic, medical sector, and so on. IT sector was second, and of course, agriculture also performed strongly. So they, I think they invested probably 200 million rand, and they've reopened, and they want to double the capacity within the next couple of years. Toyota opened their new production of the Toyota Cross production line. That's another 2,000 jobs there. Sappi has a major 1.5 billion rand expansion. Richards Bay Minerals not only reopened, but is starting their 6.5 billion Zulti South expansion. So we've had about over 10 billion rand of investment practically expressed, not long-term intention. And that's tremendous for confidence building.
Absolutely. You speak about confidence quite often. It would be a big tragedy to lose the gains that have been made up to this stage, for whatever reason, including any kind of resurgence of the unrest we saw in July. What kind of stories are you telling potential investors about the measures you're putting in place to ensure that that nightmare doesn't replay in the near future, but certainly also in the distant future?
We've got to learn the lessons, whether it's the failure on the state the security side. We think the president has responded on that side, reorganized, and we're seeing the evidence of it. There has to be better intelligence gathering, but we also have to have better conversations with our communities. To a certain extent, the realization is that COVID created a little bit of a gap. I can recall that before COVID, as government, provincial, local, even national, in regular contact with our communities in one engagement or the other. COVID put a stop to that, and I think that created a little bit of a gap.
Do you think the hearings with the Human Rights Commission could help with that bridging? Because we know that those are currently taking place to look into
That's a very specific part of it, which is dealing with some specific instances. But I'm talking here about a wider level of conversation. But already we're picking up that the conversations in the communities are that, look, what happened was wrong. It's taken us back. If you take an area like Edendale, for example, where the Edendale shopping center was looted and burned, that was 2,200 jobs, many of whom were black African business people that had built themselves up. So that's like insanity, isn't it? That should happen against the objectives that we have as a nation and as a country. So my feedback is that there's a realization that was simply wrong. It should not have happened. It must not happen again. But it doesn't mean we ignore the basic inequalities, the levels of unemployment, the need for people to feel a sense of ownership of whatever economic activity is happening. And that's why the social compact becomes quite critical. I think it must put more energy into our own efforts. We have what we call the KZN Economic Council, a social compact that brings together government, business, labor and civil society, where we put the information on the table, we share ideas so that labor knows what's happening and making input, and also gets a sense of ownership of the economy of the province. And when private sector also needs to understand that when you are, and this is a very specific example, when you're building a mall in a township, now how do you do it in a way that the local community feels they have a stake in a sense of ownership?
Increasing their levels of ownership at the very least, so that they too can protect the assets really that are bestowed to that community. Ravi Pillay, thanks very much indeed for speaking to us. Really do appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Mr. Pillay is the MEC for Economic Development, Tourism and Environmental Affairs here in Kwazulu-Natal. Reflections on where we are, but more importantly, what we need to get us to where we want to be. So those really are some of the conversations that have echoed throughout the Durban ICC here as we keep watching the Intra-African Trade Fair 2021.
Thank you very much, Ayanda, Nyathi.